There are essentially three questions that hang over from the budget. One, did Rachel Reeves tell the truth? Two, will Keir Starmer sack her? And three, what does it tell you about the relationship between the government and officials? So let's look at them in turn. First of all, did Rachel Reeves tell the truth? Well, I think the answer here is really very clear, and it's interesting how strong the attacks on her have been. Politicians very rarely accuse each other of being liars. And the reason for that is that we all know that most politicians, most of the time, try to tell the truth. That's not to say we don't gossip, that's not to say we don't try and put it in the most favourable terms, that's not to say we don't spin, but we very rarely, as a class of people, say things that can be shown to be fake, the time at which we say them, and that we know are fake. So, when Keir Starmer said he would smash the gangs, everyone recognised that was a pious aspiration. It might have been unlikely, it might have been improbable, but it wasn't a direct lie. But what did Reeves say? Well, this is really important because Daily Mail's given a helpful timeline of information. So in September, the Financial Times reported that there could be a new black hole of tens of billions of pounds because of a decline in productivity. But then on the 17th of September, just a day later, the OBR gives the Treasury initial forecasts showing that higher tax revenues have wiped out the gap that's caused by the decline in productivity, or at least largely. That was £21 billion of gap that was largely wiped out. Then, just over a month later, 6 weeks later, on October the 31st, the OBR's last pre-measures forecast says that that gap created by the reduction in expected productivity increases has gone altogether, and not only has it gone altogether, but there is a surplus, a headroom for the Chancellor of £4 billion. Now, a few days later, on the 4th of November, Miss Reeves gives her extraordinary breakfast meeting when she tells people we're all doomed and she's going to have to raise income tax because of it. And she says that productivity downgrades will have consequences, ignoring the increase in forecast tax revenues. She then did the same on the 10th of November, and then it's revealed that she's ditched her plan to raise income tax because the black hole, which was thought to be 30 billion, has reduced to 20 billion. But that wasn't true. It had gone altogether, it had gone to positive headroom of 4 billion. And then you get to the budget, where the tax rises are predicated on the decline in productivity and the need to create a buffer because of that. In fact, the tax rises we now know were undeniably needed to pay the extra welfare benefits that Rachel Reeves had decided to do. So she admitted it, it was her choice, and the choice that she made was to raise taxes on working people, breaking the manifesto commitment to give more money to those who are not working, from the strivers, from the workers to the shirkers. A very clear choice, which she tried to sell to the British public based on the lie of necessity. So yes, she said things that were not true. She may not technically have misled Parliament, and the consequences of that are very serious, but she unquestionably broke the ministerial code in giving a briefing outside Parliament when Parliament was sitting, and she misled the British public. And the point of not being allowed to mislead Parliament is so you don't mislead the public. It's not all about MPs, it's actually about the voters. So she has committed a serious error of judgment, misleading the British people, and many people are going further and saying this is actually lying. Not just Conservative politicians, but newspaper commentators as well. So then you come on to the question of can Sir Keir sack her? And the answer to that seems to me to be unequivocally no, because if he were to sack her, he would leave himself extremely vulnerable. Rachel Reeves is the human shield for Keir Starmer. He has to take the blame for this as well. He is the First Lord of the Treasury, the Chancellor is Second Lord. The budget is primarily the policy of the Prime Minister and Chancellor, always has been. Other ministers don't know about it until much later on. He can't pretend he didn't know what was going on. and he is so politically weak that if he lost his chancellor, he would lose himself. And if you think back in history, the loss of a chancellor is almost always fatal. I can think of occasions when it's not. We can go back to Salisbury accepting the resignation of Randolph Churchill, and Churchill famously said he'd forgotten Goshen, who was appointed to take his place. We can think of Macmillan dealing with the resignation of Thornycroft, or of Wilson dealing with the resignation of Callaghan. But Margaret Thatcher did not survive the departure of Nigel Lawson, or indeed didn't survive it for very long, and we know only too well that Liz Truss did not survive the departure of Kwasi Kwarteng. So he loses his chancellor, he himself is at risk, and he's at even more risk because the jackals are circling. Now, this week, the jackal who is circling most strongly is Angela Rayner because of his watering down of the workers' rights bill, the employment rights bill. I happen to think that reform, that change of policy, abandonment of another manifesto commitment, U-turn if you want, is a very beneficial one, a very important one, but it makes him more vulnerable. And I'm beginning to wonder, and this may be something for a further discussion, whether Angela Rayner risks getting into the Michael Portillo and David Miliband position if she doesn't go for her challenge fairly soon. But certainly, if Reeves went, I can't see why Angela Rayner or Ed Miliband or a stalking horse wouldn't throw his or her hat into the ring. I think that's getting very close anyway, and that Reeves going would make it inevitable. So, point one, yes, we were misled, possibly lied to. Point two, the Prime Minister isn't strong enough to sack the Chancellor. Point three, what does it say about the relationship between the government and officials? Because this is absolutely fascinating. I'm no fan of the ABR. I carry no candle for it. I think it is an incompetent organisation that has much too much power. It is unaccountable, it's unelected, and it doesn't do its job very well. And it did that spectacularly, or proved that spectacularly on Wednesday, when it leaked the whole budget before the Chancellor had got to the dispatch box to deliver her text. It put out its own paper, which gave all the details of what was going to be in the budget, not actually the speech itself, but all the details were contained. Sheer incompetence. Still think the chairman should carry the can for that. He's on the deck, he's in charge, the buck surely stops with him. Blaming junior officials and technical problems seems to me weak and cowardly, actually. It's not the honourable thing to do. He ought to go. But this statement that the ABR has put out, detailing the information it gave to the Chancellor, shows a complete breakdown in the relationship between the government and officials. Because this isn't a leak, it's not a briefing, it's a formal statement that the Chancellor knew things that were contrary to what she said. If the ABR hadn't come out and said this, we would have had no idea that the Chancellor was telling porky pies. But the ABR has come out and said it, and that indicates that the Treasury-ABR relationship is utterly shattered. And it's interesting because when Labour came in, they thought that the problem with government was that the Conservatives didn't listen to officials who were good and wise and broadly lefty and would be very supportive of a Labour government. They've now found that officials have their own agenda anyway. I don't think the ABR, as it happens, should have put out this document. I think there should be confidentiality between the government and the ABR. But it has, and it's shown Rachel Reeves up to be a teller of untruths. And that's important, but it's still wrong, but it shows a dysfunctional relationship at the heart of government. So you've got a really damaging situation. You've got government that just isn't functioning. And it's not functioning because of political weakness, division, and a default position of not telling the truth. We know that Rachel Reeves is not necessarily straightforward about her CV. We know that's been burnished and exaggerated and blown up beyond what it was. We know now that she has misled people about how she formed her budget. We know the Prime Minister's too weak to fire her because there are people who want his job. And we know at the heart of government, officials, civil servants and ministers are not working hand in glove. It's a very bad way for the nation to be governed. I don't believe it will last. I think both Reeves and Starmer will be out in the not too distant future, but it's always a mistake to predict exactly when. Thank you for listening. Just as an aside, the reason I'm sitting by the fire is not because I'm freezing cold, but because it's such a splendid fire. I thought we'd like to see it. It seems to me almost medieval with some really large logs put on it. So I'm afraid the fire is there just for fun. There is no hidden message or allegory in the fire today, in case you thought that I believed the country was burning down. I don't. Thank you for watching.